What is going on, guys? It is Daniel Wright, and you are here listening to another episode of Paving the Way. Happy Wednesday to you. I'm glad to have you back again for another episode that hopefully is going to provide you and anyone you might share this with a little bit of value. It's pretty crazy to think that I've been saying, welcome to another show of Paving the Way for 166 times now. Or the intro is, what is going on, guys? Yeah, that one. I was recently talking to somebody who actually got to know me through this podcast, through our YouTube channel on Proline, and he had his brother-in-law in the car with him who works in his company, and he got his brother on the phone. He said, "Hey man, do your intro to the podcast." I said, "Hey, you can hear it if you watch it tomorrow morning when it comes out." And so it was kind of a little funny joke there, but nonetheless, it just got me thinking about that as it just came out of my mouth. I was like, man, I've been saying this a lot of times over the last several years that we've been doing this. And for all those who have been following along since the beginning, I'm sure you can see that the content, the delivery, and I think the overall messages are a lot different than what they started out as. Because I don't know, I'm just going down memory lane right now. I wasn't planning to do this, but that's what happens when you tune into Paving the Way. You never know where we're going to go. But anyways, when we started this, it was just me turning on a camera in my office one evening, and because I told the group at Top Contractor School that I was going to start a podcast, and I didn't want to be called a liar or be made out to be a fake. So that's what I did. And so now you guys have had multiple years, 165 previous episodes of me proving that I'm not a liar, I'm not full of crap, and I'm genuinely here to help you guys get better and people that you know get better. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and kind of dive into today's topic. It's going to be about culture. So I was recently asked to be a guest on my friend Jay Doran's podcast, Culture Matters, and it was a great conversation, right? A lot of people that I get to talk to, they want to talk about more like tactics, right? Like the really nitty gritty of, well, how do you do this or how do you do that? And one thing I love about talking with Jay is getting to talk about more broad scale strategic ideas. You know, he'll maybe dive in on a couple specific points, but expand on them and really hit next level layers of information, of thoughts, and just really going deep on things. So that was a great conversation. The topic of culture being a competitive advantage came up recently, and it's ironic because I was kind of going through some different topics to think about, and it all tied together because I was just driving down the road today, and I was thinking, you know what? How is it that we at Proline are competing with some of these really big companies, whether they're private equity backed, whether they're companies that have been here for, decades and decades, whether it's newer companies that just have been killing it and, just generating a ton of cash flow and revenue. And honestly, the true, genuine thought is I said, money can make a lot of things happen, but it can't buy a culture. And that was a thought I had while I was driving down the highway today. And so it just fits that this is going to be the topic for tonight. We're going to talk about how culture beats a strategy, how to set the expectations for your culture, and maybe give you a couple of real world examples of things that we have done well and things that we haven't done well over the years. So with that being said, let's get started. All right, guys, welcome back. That was a long intro, so if you are still here hanging around, I appreciate you. And for the veteran listeners, I'm guessing you probably hit that like fast forward 30-second button during the intro because you've heard it now 165 times. So, but nonetheless, guys, like I said, happy to have you here as always. I want to talk a little bit about culture this week and why it is the competitive advantage, right? Like I said before the intro kicked on I've been thinking about, what is it that's allowing our company to continue growing year after year after year? When there's times, and yes, I'm being, slightly humble when I say this right now, there's times where I feel like we're not really doing much to make it grow. But then when I sit back and think about it and I look at what we are doing, who we are, how we do things, why we do things, I realize that a lot of it roots back to our culture. Our culture is rooted in who we are as a team, right? And that starts from the top. That starts from myself, from Kelsey, my wife, from our leadership team, and it trickles throughout the organization all the way to the newest member on our team. And our culture is rooted in that we have morals, we have values, we have high ethical standards and expectations. We have very strong core values. We have a very strong mission and vision for why we exist, what we're hoping to accomplish, and why that matters to us. And so that culture really starts, and it has to become infectious throughout your organization. And when I've thought about that, like we have good strategies, like I told you about that I talked with my friend Jay on his podcast was, we talked about some different, company strategies, but a lot of the strategic things that he brought up was more about the company culture, which makes sense because that's his podcast. That's his business. Is all about culture and why it matters and how to build it and how to nourish it and how to expand it. And so I think over the years, we've been very, very intentional about what kind of culture we want to create because we know that the strategy behind what we do as a business, right? So in pavement maintenance, seal coating a parking lot is not any sort of intellectual property, right? Striping lines on the parking lot is not earth-shattering, groundbreaking news that no one has ever known how to do before. Filling cracks with hot rubber or filling potholes or putting in handicap signs or installing speed bumps or patching asphalt and concrete, none of that is brain science. And so we have to make sure that we're doing something to differentiate ourselves, not just for our clients, but also for the team that we intend to recruit and hire and retain. And so through that, we've developed a culture. We've developed a culture of who Proline is. And so, like I said earlier, excuse me, what we do isn't rocket science. It's not earth-shattering. And so we have to make sure that we are showing up and presenting ourselves in a way that differentiates ourselves day in and day out. And that's why I believe that culture beats strategy when things get hard, right? Because at the end of the day, let's face it, whether it's looking at external sources, okay? So we're talking about our clients. So maybe the economy gets hard. Maybe somebody's under a crunch at their job for getting a project done, whatever it might be. Ultimately, that individual, for the most part, it's not every person, but for the most part, that individual is, when things get hard, they're going to lean on someone they can trust. They're going to lean on someone they believe in. They're going to lean on someone that they support and that they want to be a part of what they're doing, right? And so if we are only focused on telling people how great we can do at seal coating or striping their parking lot, or telling them how cheap we can do it, or telling them how, whatever surface level example you want to use, that's not really going to matter when things get hard. What's going to matter is that they're going to recall that time that they felt like they were important from our company because of the thank you card they received that was handwritten by the person who estimated their project. They're going to tell you that they wanted to work with us when things got tight because they know that we have a team that cares about them and meeting their deadlines and their requirements and doing everything we can to help make them get that taken care of. They're going to work with us because they know that the guys that show up on site are going to treat them as the client with respect and dignity and appreciation, no matter how hot it is outside, no matter what time of day it is, no matter what obstacles are going on. They know that we are there to serve them. And all those things, right? Like all those examples of us making sure to put that client's schedule at the top of the priority list, making sure that we treat them with respect and dignity and appreciation, making sure that we show our gratitude for them when the project is complete. All of those things come from a culture that we've created, right? Because at the end of the day, the people who work here, they don't have to do those things. It would not be in their best interest to not do those, but they don't have to. They're humans with choices, and they can make the decisions on how they treat people. They can make decisions on how they prioritize things. They can make decisions on, how they show gratitude for a client. But for the most part, all those examples I just gave was culture. It's who we hire. It's how we train them. It's how we become infectious, like I said, about what we're out here to do. Because anybody can do the tasks that we do, but not anybody can replicate why we do them the way we do them or how we do them the way we do them. And by the how, it's not the tactical application method. It's the how we carry ourselves, how we talk to people, how we communicate, how we treat each other, right? And that's the thing, that when things get hard for those client-facing situations, that no matter how big of a company you are, no matter how flashy you are, no matter how much money you make, how much money you're paying your people, you can't replicate that. That's a cultural thing. Okay. And then internally, right? When things get hard internally, because let me tell you, after 9 years of doing this, they get hard. You have a lot of hard conversations. You have a lot of friction. You have a lot of disagreements. You have a lot of high demands. You have a lot of deadlines to meet. You have a lot of setbacks because of equipment failures or product failures or malfunctions or things like that. And so when things get hard internally, what do we have to make sure that we rely on? It's our culture, right? Because no standard operating procedure, no policy, no employee handbook, no any of that stuff that corporate America wants to put out there is going to pull a team through a challenging situation. The culture does. None of those things that corporate America puts out there are going to encourage and entice the individual to show up for the rest of their team when they do not feel like it. A culture does. Nobody is going to make somebody put in the extra work when they really don't have to because they're off the clock or the project was already completed or their shift is over or their time, their schedule said they would be off at a certain amount of time. No one is going to make that person do that, but culture will. Okay. And so in our company, we have so many obstacles and difficulties that we have to overcome on a regular basis. Why? Because we work in an imperfect world. We work in the elements. We work with equipment and machines and products that all of it has to mesh just so perfectly if we want an absolutely flawless execution. And so what do we have to do instead of that? We have to create a culture and an atmosphere that will create the flawless execution despite the imperfections that the world throws at us. And so the culture that we've created is what allows us to generate those projects and those outcomes that we can get time after time again, despite the obstacles that we have to overcome. And so no strategy that you come up with, right, is going to actually be executed perfectly every time. What's the Mike Tyson quote? Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face or punched in the mouth, whatever it may be. Nonetheless, we all have that plan. We all have that strategy. But unless you have a deeply rooted and common cause for why you're doing what you're doing as an organization, no strategy will beat it. It won't happen. So that's why I encourage you to make sure that you're focusing on the culture over the strategy. The strategy is important, but the culture will carry you through when the strategy fails at first contact. Inside that strategy, inside that culture, you have to make sure that you're setting the expectations clearly, right? And so for us, the way we set those expectations is oftentimes communicated through our core values. Like I've talked about before numerous times, we have 6 core values that we live by here day in and day out. They're not negotiable. They are our standards, and we do not negotiate our standards. As I discussed in a previous podcast, and I think a couple of them, they all kind of related with each other. The how and the why equals success, and your standards equal your results, right? So we have to set the expectations and the standards within our company, within our culture, in order to get the results time in and time out. There's a ton of companies out there that you guys see, and you see them on social media, you see them on YouTube, you see them online, you see them in your local neighborhood, wherever you may be at, and you think, man, those people have it all together. And let's call a spade right now. I'm sure there's people who watch this podcast, who watch our YouTube channels, watch our Instagram channels, and they think, man, that Proline company, man, they're perfect. They've got it all. They've got the people, the equipment, the cameraman, the cool graphics, the great parking lots, and the jobs, and the whole process, right? And I'll tell you right now, we've got it pretty freaking good. We've got it pretty freaking awesome day in and day out. But we are not perfect, okay? And that's why we always try to tell you guys, follow along on our journey. We put it all out there for you guys to see. Now, of course, we want to highlight the highlight reels, just like anybody else does. But at the end of the day, you also get opportunities to see who we really are, because it's not just a facade. It's why we invite people to come to our business. It's why we invite potential new hires to do a work interview day with us, where you get to see a day in the life of Proline. You get to interact with the people who are working out their day-to-day stuff, oftentimes without a camera around. No mics, no cameras, no anything. The real people. And so that way it gives people a chance to see who we are in real life is the same as who you see on camera, right? Because we do very good at displaying who we are on camera, but only a few people take us up on that opportunity to see who we are behind the scenes, who we are here in the office, who we are in the shop, in the trucks, out on the job sites when, like I said, the cameras aren't rolling. So you have to set those expectations so clearly, and you have to set those values so clearly and communicate them so often that you feel like you're repeating yourself day in and day out. But nonetheless, guys, when things get hard, right? Listen to this. When things get hard, we do not rise to the occasion. We fall to the level of our expectations. Okay? And so whatever your expectations are is what you're going to fall to when things get challenging. And so if you're trying to overcome something, if you're trying to defeat the difficulties of the day-to-day life, or a difficult year, or a difficult time in your business, in your team, in your life, whatever it may be, you will not rise to the occasion. You will fall to the level of your expectations. And if you are not communicating those and setting those very clearly, and you're passing them along and you're reinforcing them day in and day out through all different lines of communication, you will not see the results that you want to see. You will be unsatisfied with where you're at and where you're going. And so you have to set those expectations. You have to set those values so clearly, because ultimately that's what's going to drive the performance of your team. Okay? Because our guys and girls that show up here day in and day out, they know what they need to do for their jobs, right? Like they understand what the tasks are that they're supposed to accomplish. But to the level of which we expect them to accomplish it is driven through our values. It's driven through our culture. And that's what separates us from other people as an employer or as a contractor. Okay, so we're talking about that in two different facets. The people who hire us and the people that we hire. How they view us matters on both sides. But our culture is what ultimately defines us. Okay, and I'll tell you, I'll close this out with a short little story. And if anyone's listening from this time frame, don't take any offense to this, because this was 100% our fault. And it's something that we've learned from over the last several years. But back in 2021, okay, a lot of people, through COVID had various their businesses had various responses to the economy due to COVID and things like that. And our business, fortunately, was growing. Okay, we grew through 2020. We grew through 2021. We've grown every year that we've been in business. So we've been on a straight up slope for the last 9 years. So we were growing rapidly. We had high demand for projects. We were purchasing new equipment. We were hiring new individuals. We were trying, to implement new softwares and new, checklists and project management tools and whatever it may be, right? So we were growing and growing and growing. We had new people in roles that they hadn't really had a lot of experience in before, myself included. We had demands and requests from clients that we had never really had to overcome before, but we were bound and determined to figure it out. And we were going to figure it out through brute force. Okay. And I'd have to look back on the archives of these podcasts, because I don't remember if this goes back that far, but I'm talking about the year 2021. And we refer to that year as the draft class year. Okay. 2021, we came out of the gates screaming. We were ready to go. We were ready to take on every project that came to us, hire anybody with a heartbeat and was willing to show up to a first day of work. And we were just gonna get it done. And I can tell you, okay, I'll fast forward to the ending for the people who don't want to listen to the whole nonsense for the middle side of it, the meat and potatoes. We got it done. 2021 was a successful year for our business. Okay. The meat and potatoes side of it is we royally sacrificed the culture of our organization. Okay. We had more friction that year. We had more blowups. We had more tempers. We had more attitudes, more egos, more disagreements, more go backs on projects because they weren't communicated well, more people that turned through the door That's why we call it the draft class, because we just welcomed anybody in the door and hopefully they stuck. And if they didn't, they churned right out. We had more cultural problems in 2021 than any other year in business. And the reason I remember it so specifically that it was 2021 is because of, truthfully, how tough it was. Okay. There's been other tough things that we've encountered, right? I've said 2024 was the toughest year that I've had personally in business and personally and professionally. But as a company as a whole, I truly believe 2021 holds the record for the toughest year yet. And it's because we did not put the emphasis on culture. We did not reinforce core values on a regular basis. We did not reward on executing, going above and beyond our core values. We did not discipline on core values. We did not hold people to the level and the standards of our cultural expectations that we wanted for our company. And part of the reason we didn't do that is because we didn't have it clearly defined. And even though we had a good general idea of what we wanted and where we wanted things to go and how we wanted them done, we were not regularly communicating them, right? At that time, I thought it was the random showing up when the guys were getting ready to roll out, give them a little 3-minute pep talk, tell them how much I appreciate them, and they'll go have a great day. All right? We weren't doing the quarterly outings. We weren't doing the monthly company meetings. We weren't doing the recognition of the core values. We weren't doing all of these things that make us who we are that has nothing to do with what we do on a day-to-day basis, right? So we were not executing on what matters most, and that's cultivating the culture of our organization. And so in the years since, right, in 2022, in 2023, 24, and now through 25, we put a massive, massive emphasis on communicating who we are, what we do, what we stand for, and why it matters. Because if we don't do that, we get lost in the obstacles. We get defeated by the challenges that we face. We get caught up in our own egos. We get destroyed by the blame throwers, right? When something doesn't go right, we find out who to cast blame on. We let our standards slip. We find ourselves slowly fading backwards and slowly turning into a company that we want nothing to do with. And so we put so much emphasis on going so far away from that, right? Growing up and to the right of a company that's progressing and growing forward into something that we can be proud of, something that everybody associated with us that sees our logo on our shirts that can be proud of and say, yeah, I work with Proline. I work at the company, or I hire them to work on my property. Or, hey, I may not have a need for their services right now, but by God, if somebody else I know needs them, I'm going to recommend them because I believe in that culture, because I believe in what they're doing. I believe in the lives that they're changing day in and day out. And they have nothing to prove to anybody, but they still show up and do it. So that's why culture will always be your competitive advantage. It will be your best recruitment strategy. It'll be your best retainment strategy. It'll be your best marketing strategy. It'll be your best sales strategy, your best business development strategy, and heck, maybe one day your best retirement strategy. Because if you do it right as the leader, the small business owner, whatever position you may be in that carries influence, if you do it right for a long enough period of time, you will reap the rewards in your life. The problem is most people won't commit to the time. They want it right now. So I challenge you right now, this week, this next month, whatever it may be for you, I challenge you, take an inventory on what's the culture for your team. Whether it's a team of 2, 20, or 200, what does the culture look like? How would you define it? I'd love to hear your feedback. Shoot me a message, drop a comment, whatever it may be. How would you define the culture for your team? And if it doesn't align with what you want, how would you define the culture that you want? Because that's the first step in making the progress towards where you want to be. You have to first define where you're at, then you define where you want to go, and then you fill in the blank in the middle on how to get there. From there, my question would be, after you define your culture, what kind of expectations and values do you operate by to drive the team's performance day in and day out? Because ultimately, what the expectations you have and what values you operate by are going to render those results, right? The driving the performance, the results. And so if you're not getting those results, what did we talk about last week? Look at your standards, AKA in this conversation, it's your expectations, your values, what you stand for. And then I would ask you then to share with myself or anyone for that matter, because it's not real unless you actually communicate it to somebody other than your own head. My challenge to you would be to share a story about your culture for your team with somebody. Find a way in a conversation to share either a win of something that's going very well or share a loss of something that you've learned from. Because both of them matter for the future that you're trying to create. And I believe with all that I've got, because truthfully, as I'm wrapping this podcast up, I feel like it's probably one of my better ones because I truthfully feel so genuinely passionate about this topic that if you can do these things, if you can define what your culture is right now and where you want to be, if you can define what your values are and your expectations and what you stand for, and if you are able to provide actual examples, real life ones, not ones that you want, not ones that you fantasize about, not ones that you have nightmares about, but actual examples of your culture, you can define those things. I believe with all my heart that you are on the track to creating something bigger than you've ever thought possible. Just don't quit. So that's my challenge for you guys this week. I would ask you, like I said in the middle of this show, if you want to see more about what we do and who we are, follow along on our social channels. I always post them in the description of these shows on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook, but follow along to see who we are. I challenge that because there's so many fakes out there. There's so much smoke and mirrors. And if following along doesn't give you the answers, I invite you to our office, to our job sites. Okay? If you want to do that, shoot me a DM and we'll get it arranged. I promise. But I challenge you to take a look introspectively on your team and your culture and where you're at and where you want to go. Because like I say all the time, guys, the reason I do this show is because I truly want to pave the way for the next level of leaders, the next generation of entrepreneurs, the next generation of business leaders, business owners, and the people who go out there day in and day out, blood, sweat, and tears, risk it all so that someone else can have a better life because of the chances they took. So share this with somebody who you might find some, they might get some value. Comment, like on it, whatever it may be. Help the algorithm out so this message gets out to more people. And as always, guys, I appreciate you tuning in. I appreciate the support, and we will be back next week. If you need anything,